The morning bustle at Denver International Airport came to a sudden halt when Max, a veteran German Shepherd canine, lunged unexpectedly at Chief Pilot James Thompson. The dog's powerful jaws clamped onto the pilot's sleeve, refusing to let him pass toward the boarding gate. Passengers froze mid-step, coffee cups suspended in air as security personnel rushed to the scene. "Max, release!" commanded Robert Wilson, the dog's 58-year-old handler, his weathered face etched with confusion. In 8 years of service, Max had never behaved this way without cause. Thompson, a respected pilot with over 12,000 flight hours, appeared equally shocked. "What's wrong with your dog?" he demanded, trying to shake free. "I have 287 passengers waiting to board." As security surrounded them, Robert noticed something in Max's behavior. The intense focus on Thompson's left lapel, and a chill ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Robert Wilson hadn't always been an airport security officer with a canine partner. In his younger days, he'd served 22 years in the Army's Special Forces, where precision and instinct meant the difference between life and death. At 58, his face now carried deep lines that mapped a life of vigilance, loss, and quiet dedication. A widower for 11 years, Robert's world revolved around two loves, his daughter Sarah and his German Shepherd, Max. Max came into Robert's life during his darkest hour. 3 years ago, Robert had lost his human partner, Jack, during a failed counterterrorism operation at a bus terminal in Chicago. The nightmares still haunted him, the explosion, the screams, the knowledge that better intelligence might have saved lives. After that, Robert transferred to airport security, bringing with him a solemn vow: never again would he miss a threat. Max wasn't just any police dog. At 10 years old, the German Shepherd had been rescued from a building collapse where he'd been trapped for days. The trauma had left him with a slight limp and a peculiar intensity. Veterinarians had recommended euthanasia, claiming the dog was too damaged for service, but Robert had seen something in those intelligent brown eyes. A kindred spirit who understood survival. Sarah Wilson, at 32, had followed a different path than her father. As Denver International Airport's operations manager, she embodied the modernizing spirit of aviation security. She loved her father dearly, but worried his reliance on old-school methods was becoming obsolete in an age of full-body scanners and artificial intelligence threat detection. "Dad, the board approved the final timeline yesterday," she had told him just last week. "The K9 program ends in 6 months. They're bringing in the new Apex scanning system." Director Thomas Carter, the airport's 61-year-old security chief, had been more blunt. "We're investing $50 million in technology that doesn't need walks or treats, Wilson. Your dog's good, but machines don't miss things because they're having an off day." Neither Sarah nor Carter could understand what Robert knew bone deep: that the bond between handler and dog created something technology couldn't replicate. Intuition refined by thousands of years of evolution and trust. And as retirement loomed for both Robert and Max, he couldn't shake the feeling that their most important work still lay ahead. The December morning at Denver International Airport brought bone-chilling cold that seeped through Robert's regulation jacket as he and Max completed their routine patrol of Terminal B. Their breath formed small clouds in the air as they moved methodically through the bustling international departure area. Despite the cold, Max maintained perfect focus, his German Shepherd instincts fully engaged in scanning the environment, the passengers, the luggage, the subtle changes in air currents carrying thousands of scent molecules. "Final sweep completed, heading back to security station." Robert spoke into his radio, his tone reflecting the efficiency of a man who'd done this job for years. Max trotted beside him, the specialized K9 harness identifying him as more than just a pet. The morning had been uneventful: routine bag checks, a false alarm when a passenger abandoned a backpack, and the usual suspicious package that turned out to be an oddly wrapped Christmas gift. As they rounded the corner toward the staff area, Director Thomas Carter stood waiting, arms crossed over his chest, tablet in hand. His expression communicated all Robert needed to know. Another conversation about the imminent retirement of the K-9 program was coming. "Wilson, got a minute?" Carter gestured to a quieter corner. "I need to update you on the transition schedule." Robert nodded, signaling Max to sit. The dog obeyed instantly but remained alert, those intelligent eyes moving continuously across the terminal. "The board has accelerated the timeline," Carter stated without preamble. "Budget considerations. Max's last day will be the end of this month, not next quarter. Your reassignment to the technology division starts January 3rd. Robert felt his jaw tighten. "That's 3 weeks away, sir. We were promised 6 months. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Carter said, his tone softening slightly. "But the Apex system test results came back exceptional. 99.8% detection rate across all threat categories. The future is here, Wilson. And what about Max?" Robert asked, his hand instinctively moving to the dog's head. "Animal Services has a nice retirement program for K9S. He'll be placed with—" Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's arrival. Her heels clicked purposefully across the terminal floor as she approached, carrying a stack of files. "Dad, Director Carter," she nodded to both men. "I've got the flight manifest you requested and the updated security protocols." She handed the files to Carter, then turned to her father. "I've been meaning to talk to you about Max's retirement. I know a family in Boulder who—" She never finished her sentence. Max suddenly tensed, his body language transforming entirely. A low growl rumbled from his throat as his attention fixed on something, or someone, behind Robert. Robert turned to see a pilot walking confidently through the terminal, pulling a small regulation suitcase. The man wore the distinctive uniform of Atlantic Airways, captain stripes gleaming on his shoulders, his posture carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to commanding a commercial airliner. Without warning, Max lunged forward, the sudden movement nearly pulling the leash from Robert's grip. The handler recovered quickly, restraining the powerful dog, but Max's behavior was unprecedented. 8 years of working together, and Robert had never seen Max react this way to airline personnel. "Max, stand down," Robert commanded firmly, but the dog continued growling, straining toward the pilot. The pilot stopped, startled by the commotion. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice calm and measured despite the 80-pound German Shepherd displaying aggressive behavior merely feet away. "I apologize, Captain," Robert said, maintaining firm control of Max. "He's never reacted this way before." "James Thompson, Atlantic Airways," the pilot introduced himself, extending his ID badge cautiously. "Flight 1342 to London. Perhaps your dog is picking up scent from the international cargo I just cleared?" Director Carter stepped forward, embarrassment clear on his face. "Captain Thompson, I'm so sorry about this incident. Officer Wilson and his K-9 were just finishing their shift." He shot Robert a pointed look. "This is exactly the kind of unpredictable behavior we're eliminating with the new system." But Robert wasn't listening to Carter anymore. He was watching Max, reading the dog's body language like a book he'd studied for years. This wasn't confusion or excitement. This was alert behavior, focused, deliberate, certain. Max wasn't just reacting, he was detecting. "Sir," Robert addressed Thompson directly, "I need to ask you to step aside for additional screening." The pilot's eyebrows rose, a flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossing his face before it returned to professional composure. "Additional screening? I've been through security already, and I have a pre-flight briefing in 10 minutes. "I understand, sir, but this is protocol when a K-9 officer alerts." Sarah stepped in, clearly mortified. "Dad, Captain Thompson's flight has 287 passengers already boarding. We can't delay an international departure because Max is having an off day." "It's not an off day," Robert insisted quietly, noting how Max's attention remained fixed specifically on the left side of the pilot's uniform jacket. "Something's wrong." The next 30 minutes unfolded in a tense standoff. Security protocols dictated that any K-9 alert be taken seriously, yet the practical reality of delaying an international flight with hundreds of passengers already boarding created immediate pressure. Robert found himself standing firm against increasingly frustrated airline representatives, while Captain Thompson maintained a calm but noticeably cooling demeanor. "This is completely unacceptable," snapped Atlantic Airways gate manager, a thin woman with a permanent clipboard grip. "Do you understand the costs involved in delaying an international flight? The connecting passengers, the airport slot times in London." Director Carter pulled Robert aside, his voice low and tight. "Wilson, you better be damn sure about this. If that dog is wrong, it's both your careers ending today, not next month." "I've never seen Max react like this," Robert insisted, watching as his dog remained focused on the pilot's left side, particularly the area around the jacket lapel. "He's alerting to something specific." Sarah stepped in, her operational expertise taking over despite her personal concern. "Dad's right about one thing. We have to follow protocol." She turned to Thompson. "Captain, I apologize, but we need to conduct a secondary screening in a private area. It shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Thompson checked his watch, a gesture that seemed both natural and slightly performative. "Fine, 15 minutes. But someone needs to inform my co-pilot to begin pre-flight preparations without me." They moved to a small security room near the gate area, away from the curious eyes of passengers. Max never relaxed, maintaining his alert posture even in the confined space. 2 additional security officers joined them, along with a reluctant Director Carter. "Captain, please place your belongings on the table and remove your jacket," instructed the senior screening officer, a veteran named Peterson. Thompson complied with practiced efficiency, his movements precise. Nothing in his luggage raised concerns. Standard pilot equipment, flight manuals, a small toiletry kit with permitted items. His documentation seemed impeccable. Pilot's license, medical certification, Atlantic Airways ID, passport. But Max wouldn't relent. The dog moved closer to the jacket now lying on the examination table, his nose working intensely near the left lapel. "Check the jacket," Robert urged, "especially that area." Peterson carefully examined the uniform jacket, running his fingers along seams and checking pockets. "Nothing unusual here," he reported after a minute. "Standard uniform issue." "Check the lapel," Robert insisted. "The left side." Thompson's expression shifted subtly. A tightening around the eyes, barely perceptible but caught by Robert's experienced observation. "This is becoming ridiculous," the pilot said, his voice still controlled but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "That's a standard Atlantic Airways uniform. There's nothing in the lapel." Peterson carefully turned the lapel over, finding nothing immediately visible. He ran his fingers along the inside seam and paused. "There's something here, a slight thickness." Using examination gloves, he carefully felt along the inner lining and located a nearly invisible seam that didn't match the jacket's construction. With precise movements, Peterson used a small inspection tool to open the hidden compartment. Inside was a folded piece of paper, thin as onion skin. The room went silent as Peterson carefully unfolded the document and placed it on the table. It contained what appeared to be flight routes, airport codes, timestamps, and a series of alphanumeric sequences that made little immediate sense. Thompson's face drained of color. "I've never seen that before. Someone must have planted it in my jacket." Robert studied the pilot's face, noting the subtle shifts in his expression, the almost imperceptible changes in his breathing pattern. Years of interrogation experience in military service told him one thing clearly: Thompson was lying. "Check his ID again," Robert suggested, more thoroughly this time. The Atlantic Airways ID card looked legitimate at first glance, but under closer inspection with a specialized verification light, discrepancies became evident. The holographic security features didn't reflect light correctly. The card was a sophisticated forgery. "This isn't standard issue," Peterson confirmed. "It's good enough to pass a visual check, but the embedded security features are wrong." Director Carter immediately called for additional security and notified federal authorities. "Detain him," he ordered. "Full security protocol." As Thompson was being secured, Sarah received an urgent call from operations. "The real James Thompson was reported missing 3 days ago in Chicago," she announced, her voice tight with sudden realization. "His family filed a police report when he didn't return from a layover." Robert turned to the now detained man. "Who are you really?" The man's demeanor changed entirely, his posture stiffening as he realized the game was up. He remained silent, his eyes calculating. "Check the aircraft," Robert urged, a cold sensation spreading through his chest. "If he was trying to board as pilot, we need to inspect that plane immediately." Carter didn't hesitate, immediately ordering a full security sweep of Flight 1342. Passengers were deplaned with explanations of a technical issue, and a team of security personnel, accompanied by another K-9 unit, boarded the aircraft. The call came 30 minutes later. A small, sophisticated explosive device had been found concealed in the cockpit, professionally hidden beneath the captain's seat assembly where it would be virtually undetectable to routine inspections. The device was designed to detonate at cruising altitude over the Atlantic Ocean. "My God," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "If he'd gotten on that plane—" 287 people, Carter said, his earlier skepticism completely evaporated, plus crew. All would have been lost. Robert knelt beside Max, who had finally relaxed once the jacket was secured as evidence. He ran his hand through the dog's thick fur, feeling a mixture of pride and vindication. "Good boy, Max, good boy." But as federal agents arrived to take control of the investigation, Robert's mind was already racing ahead. The document found in the fake pilot's jacket suggested something far more extensive than a lone wolf attack. The multiple airport codes, the precisely noted flight paths, this had the hallmarks of a coordinated operation. "Sir," he addressed the lead FBI agent who had just arrived, "I think we've stumbled on to something much bigger than a single flight. This looks like part of a larger plot." The agent, a sharp-eyed woman named Kelly Barnes, studied the evidence with grim focus. "I think you're right. The question is, how many more like him are out there already in position?" As if answering her question, reports began coming in from security teams at Houston, Chicago, and Miami. Similar suspicious activities were being flagged at multiple airports across the country. Whatever they had uncovered, it was just the beginning. The small conference room at Denver International Airport had been transformed into an impromptu command center within hours. Maps covered walls, computer terminals displayed flight schedules, and the coffee machine worked overtime as federal and local authorities coordinated their response to what was quickly becoming clear. They were dealing with a sophisticated, multi-surgent terrorist operation. FBI Special Agent Kelly Barnes stood at the head of the table, her tailored suit showing signs of a very long day. "The suspect is still refusing to talk," she informed the assembled team. "He's given us nothing except the name Jason Turner, which we believe is also an alias. Fingerprints and facial recognition have turned up no matches in any of our databases." Robert sat quietly at the corner of the table, Max resting at his feet. Though not technically part of the federal response team, his role in uncovering the plot had earned him a temporary place in the investigation. Director Carter and Sarah sat nearby, both looking exhausted but focused. "What we do know," Barnes continued, gesturing to the document recovered from the fake pilot's jacket, "is that this contains coded information about at least 7 different flights departing from major airports across the country over the next 48 hours. We've already flagged all these flights and implemented enhanced security protocols." "What about the explosive device?" Carter asked. "Any forensics on that?" A serious-looking man from Homeland Security nodded. "Professionally assembled, military-grade components, but with commercial modifications to avoid detection. Whoever built it knows what they're doing. Similar devices have been found in Chicago and Houston during emergency inspections." Robert had been studying the maps and flight plans with the careful eye of someone who had spent years analyzing threat patterns. Something about the target selection nagged at him. These weren't just random high-capacity flights. There was a pattern. These aren't just any international flights, he finally spoke up. They're all carrying specific types of passengers. He approached the board, pointing to the flight manifest they'd gathered. Government officials, military contractors, technology executives. Each flight has at least 3 high-value targets. Barnes looked at him with newfound respect. Wilson, right? The K-9 handler? She studied the information he'd highlighted. You may be on to something. This isn't random terrorism. It's targeted assassination disguised as terrorism. A junior agent rushed in with a tablet. We've got a preliminary idea on our suspect. Facial reconstruction with the makeup removed and run against international databases gives us an 87% match with this man. He displayed a photograph of a hard-faced individual. Jason Turner, as he calls himself, appears to be Michael Reynolds, former military contractor with extensive experience in aviation security. A security expert? Sarah looked puzzled. Why would someone with that background turn terrorist? Robert had been examining the photographs closely, something tickling at the edge of his memory. The face seemed vaguely familiar, though he couldn't place it. We've been authorized to bring in additional K-9 units, Barnes announced. If one dog could detect what all our technology missed, we need more on the ground immediately. She turned to Robert. Wilson, we'd like you and Max to fly to Chicago. Another suspect has been identified attempting to access a secure area at O'Hare. Your experience with this specific threat could be valuable. Within 2 hours, Robert and Max were aboard a government transport to Chicago. It felt strange to be back in the field after years of routine airport patrol, but there was also a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. As Max dozed beside him, Robert reviewed the case files Barnes had shared, particularly the information about the suspect being detained in Chicago. The Chicago operation moved quickly. O'Hare International Airport had already implemented emergency security protocols, causing significant delays but potentially saving hundreds of lives. Robert and Max were escorted to a secure area where another man, this one caught attempting to enter a restricted maintenance area, was being held. Max's reaction was immediate, the same intense, alerting behavior he'd shown with the fake Captain Thompson. A search revealed another hidden document with similar coded information, though this suspect had been caught before he could implement whatever plan he'd been assigned. During his Chicago interviews, Robert was shown additional evidence, photographs recovered from the suspect's hidden cloud storage. As he flipped through the images of airport blueprints and security protocols, one photograph made him freeze. It showed a woman in her early 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, standing before what appeared to be a planning board. Her face was partially turned away from the camera, but Robert recognized her immediately. "Elizabeth Stone?" he whispered, shock coursing through him. "You know her?" Barnes asked sharply. "Yes." Robert stared at the photograph, memories flooding back. "We served together years ago. Counterterrorism unit based out of Fort Bragg. She was one of the best behavioral analysts in the field." He shook his head in disbelief. "But she left service after her husband died in a plane crash about 7 years ago. I attended the funeral." Barnes immediately ordered a full background check on Elizabeth Stone. The results painted a disturbing picture of a brilliant woman's descent into obsession. After her husband's death in what was officially ruled pilot error, Elizabeth had dedicated herself to investigating the crash, convinced there was a cover-up. She'd lost her position with a prestigious security consulting firm after becoming increasingly militant about aviation safety regulations. Her husband was William Stone, an analyst reported, reading from his screen. Commercial airline pilot with 22 years of experience. The NTSB investigation concluded he made a series of errors that led to the crash, but Elizabeth Stone filed multiple challenges to the report, claiming falsified data and corporate influence over the findings. Robert remembered William Stone, a meticulous pilot with an impeccable record. Elizabeth's devastation at the funeral had been palpable, but there had also been a steely determination in her eyes that should have warned him she wouldn't accept the official narrative. She wasn't just grieving, Robert realized aloud. She was planning. As they dug deeper into Elizabeth's background, more connections emerged. She had systematically recruited individuals with specific skill sets: former military, aviation experts, security specialists, many of whom had their own grievances against the commercial aviation industry or regulatory bodies. The investigation led them to a rural property outside Denver, purchased through a shell company 3 years earlier. Satellite imagery showed minimal external activity, but thermal scans indicated it was actively occupied. "We believe this is their operational base," Barnes briefed the tactical team. "Based on the coded documents and equipment recovered so far, we suspect they've been planning this operation for years." The raid was planned for dawn the following day. As preparations continued, Robert found himself looking at security footage from various airports, attempting to identify other potential operatives. One face caught his attention: a maintenance worker at Miami International who didn't quite move like a maintenance worker. "Can you enhance this?" he asked the technician. The image clarified, and Robert felt his blood run cold. "That's Jack Peterson." "Who's Peterson?" Barnes asked. "My partner from Chicago. The one who died in the terminal bombing 3 years ago." Robert stared at the undeniable evidence before him. Except, apparently, he didn't die. This revelation shifted the investigation dramatically. Jack Peterson had been Robert's partner in the counterterrorism unit. The Chicago bombing had been devastating. Robert had seen the explosion, had been knocked unconscious by the blast, had attended Jack's funeral with a concussion and a heart full of guilt for not having saved his partner. "He must have been recruited by Elizabeth afterward," Robert said, trying to process this betrayal. "They knew each other from joint operations. If she convinced him the aviation industry was culpable for death that had been covered up..." Barnes ordered immediate apprehension of the Miami suspect. Within hours, confirmation came through. Jack Peterson had been taken into custody. Unlike the others, he asked specifically to speak with Robert. The reunion in a Miami detention center was tense and surreal. Jack looked older, hardened, a scar running down the side of his face that hadn't been there before. "You're not surprised to see me," Jack noted as Robert sat across from him at the interview table. "I am surprised you're alive. Not surprised you'd betray everything we stood for." Robert kept his voice level despite the turmoil inside him. "Why, Jack? We saved lives. Now you're taking them?" "We saved the wrong lives," Jack replied, his voice hollow. "We protected a system that's rotten to the core. Do you know how many whistleblowers get silenced in the aviation industry every year? How many near misses get buried in bureaucracy? How many families get paid off to keep quiet about safety violations?" "So you decided mass murder was the answer?" Jack leaned forward. "It was never about killing passengers, Robert. It was about exposing the truth. The explosives were designed to trigger emergency protocols without catastrophic failure. Passengers would have survived, but the world would finally see the evidence Elizabeth has spent years collecting." Robert didn't believe him for a second. "The device we found on that plane would have killed everyone aboard." "Don't lie to me." Something flickered in Jack's eyes, doubt perhaps. "That's not the plan Elizabeth shared with us. The devices were supposed to be controlled, demonstrative." He hesitated. "Unless she changed the operation parameters." Robert sensed an opening. "Jack, I think Elizabeth has been lying to all of you. This isn't about justice or exposure anymore. This is about revenge." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Barnes. Using information extracted from the various suspects, they had identified a critical piece of evidence: the original flight recorder from William Stone's crashed plane, which Elizabeth had somehow obtained and kept hidden for years. This black box, they believed, contained the true data about the crash. Data that would prove whether there had been a cover-up or not. More importantly, intelligence suggested that Elizabeth was accelerating her timeline in response to the arrests of her operatives. Whatever she had planned for her grand finale was happening soon. The raid on the Colorado compound was meticulously planned. As dawn broke over the Rocky Mountains, special tactical teams surrounded the inconspicuous ranch house and outbuildings. Robert and Max were positioned with the second entry team, the German Shepherd tense and focused beside his handler. Remember, primary objective is to secure any additional explosive devices and recover the flight recorder, Barnes reminded them through the radio. Elizabeth Stone is considered armed and extremely dangerous. Approach with caution. The breach was executed with precision. Team swept through the main house, finding sophisticated communications equipment and planning materials, but no occupants. As they moved toward the large barn structure, Max suddenly altered his behavior, pulling Robert toward a section of floor in the main room. "He's alerting to something," Robert called out. The tactical team cleared away a rug, revealing a hidden trapdoor. Beneath it lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Max led the way down the stairs, moving with surprising agility despite his age and previous injuries. The underground facility was larger than expected, a fully equipped operations center with multiple workstations, maps covering the walls, and what appeared to be a small manufacturing area where additional explosive devices had been assembled. In the center of the room stood Elizabeth Stone, her silver-streaked hair now fully white, her posture still military straight despite the years and circumstances. She held a metal flight recorder in one hand and what appeared to be a detonator in the other. "That's far enough, Robert," she said calmly. "I'm actually glad it's you. It feels appropriate somehow." Robert signaled Max to stay. "Elizabeth, this has to end now." "We've caught your operatives. We know about the plot." "Not the full plot," she corrected him. "What you found is only phase 1. The real operation was always about the evidence." She held up the flight recorder. "This contains the unaltered data from Williams' flight, the data that proves executives from Atlantic Airways deliberately covered up a critical design flaw that caused the crash, a flaw that affected dozens of aircraft still in service today. If that's true, there are legal channels. I tried those for 3 years." Elizabeth's composure cracked momentarily. "They buried me in litigation, threatened witnesses, destroyed evidence. The system protected itself." She regained control, her voice turning cold again. "But it can't hide from the truth forever." Robert noted movement behind Elizabeth as tactical team members carefully positioned themselves. He needed to keep her talking. "And the explosives on those planes? How does killing innocent people expose the truth? A necessary demonstration of what happens when profit matters more than safety. The world needed to see the consequences." Her eyes narrowed. "Though I suspect from your expression that some of my operatives modified their assignments, Turner always was more extreme than I preferred." "You recruited damaged people and pointed them at targets, Elizabeth. Did you really think you could control how they'd execute your vision?" Something in Elizabeth's expression shifted. A momentary doubt, perhaps the first recognition that her carefully constructed plan had evolved beyond her intentions. It was enough of a distraction. Max, sensing the shift in tension, suddenly darted forward, not toward Elizabeth, but toward a side door neither Robert nor the tactical team had noticed. The door burst open as Max hit it, revealing a hidden room containing a man bound to a chair, disheveled, exhausted, but very much alive. James Thompson, Robert realized aloud. The real pilot whose identity had been stolen. In that moment of surprise, the tactical team moved. Elizabeth was quickly disarmed and restrained, the flight recorder secured before she could destroy it. As she was led away, she looked at Robert one last time. "We were supposed to protect people, Robert. That's all I was trying to do." Robert didn't reply. Instead, he moved to check on the rescued pilot and called for medical assistance. Max sat alertly beside him, his mission complete but his vigilance undiminished. Later, as evidence was being cataloged and the facility secured, Barnes approached Robert. "Your dog found Thompson by scent, didn't he?" "He remembered the smell from the jacket the impersonator was wearing." Robert nodded, patting Max's head. He connects things we don't even think to look for. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. There's no technology that can replace this kind of intuition." Barnes smiled slightly. "Consider me convinced. Now we need to figure out how far this conspiracy really goes. If Elizabeth is right about the aviation executives covering up design flaws, then this is about to become much bigger than terrorism," Robert finished grimly. "We're looking at corporate conspiracy, fraud, and criminal negligence on an international scale." As they emerged from the compound into the bright Colorado sunlight, Robert couldn't help but reflect on the twisted path that had led them here, from a simple alert by an aging canine at an airport terminal to uncovering what might be one of the largest corporate cover-ups in aviation history. Max walked steadily beside him, unaware of the magnitude of what his sensitive nose had set in motion. The dog had saved hundreds of lives today, but the fight for truth, Robert suspected, was only just beginning. The evidence recovered from Elizabeth Stone's compound sent shockwaves through multiple federal agencies. The flight recorder, which she had somehow obtained through a network of sympathetic aviation employees, contained data that significantly contradicted the official NTSB report on William Stone's crash. Rather than pilot error, the preliminary analysis suggested a catastrophic failure in the aircraft's control systems that had been deliberately misattributed during the investigation. Robert watched as technical experts huddled over the device in a secure lab at the FBI's Denver field office. The atmosphere was tense. If Elizabeth's core allegations proved true, they were dealing with something far beyond terrorism. A corporate conspiracy that had potentially endangered thousands of lives over many years. The recording confirms a complete hydraulic failure that wasn't in the official report, a senior NTSB investigator explained, his face grim. And there's voice data that was definitely edited in the version we received for the original investigation. Someone sanitized this evidence. Agent Barnes rubbed her temples, the implications clearly weighing on her. So Elizabeth Stone was right about the cover-up. Atlantic Airways and possibly regulatory officials concealed design flaws to avoid costly recalls and liability. It still doesn't justify planting bombs on passenger planes, Robert pointed out, though he felt a complicated mix of emotions. Elizabeth had been his colleague once, someone he'd respected. Her descent into extremism seemed both tragic and understandable in this new light. Max lay at Robert's feet, seemingly relaxed but still alert, a veteran presence in a room filled with tension. The German shepherd had barely left Robert's side since they'd returned from the compound raid, as if sensing his handler's emotional turmoil. A junior agent burst into the room, tablet in hand. "We've got a problem, big one." He turned the screen toward Barnes, showing security footage from Denver International. "This was taken 20 minutes ago. We've got another operative on the ground." The footage showed a maintenance worker accessing a restricted area near the main terminal's electrical systems. The face was partially visible beneath a cap, enough for Robert to recognize another ghost from his past. "Michael Wright," he said, the name emerging from a decade-old memory. "Former EOD specialist. We worked together in Afghanistan. He was Elizabeth's protege before he left service." Barnes immediately activated emergency protocols, her voice sharp with urgency. "If he's at DIA now, we need to assume the worst. This could be Elizabeth's fail-safe plan." Robert was already moving toward the door, Max following instantly. "Wright is an explosives expert, specializing in infrastructural targets. He won't be going after a single plane. He'll aim for maximum system disruption." The drive back to Denver International broke several speed limits. Robert sat tensely in the tactical vehicle, reviewing what he knew about Michael Wright. The man had been brilliant, methodical, and deeply loyal to Elizabeth. If she had convinced him the aviation industry was responsible for countless covered-up deaths, there was no telling how far he would go. Sarah called as they approached the airport. "Dad, where are you?" "They've ordered a full evacuation of the main terminal, some kind of security threat. I'm with the FBI response team, 5 minutes out," Robert replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sarah, listen carefully. The suspect is likely targeting critical infrastructure, power systems, communications hubs, security networks. You need to get airport operations to check every access point to those systems." "Already on it," Sarah responded, her voice shifting to the focused professional tone Robert recognized from countless emergency drills. "Director Carter has locked down the Central Systems Hub personally. We're doing a sweep of all maintenance areas now." When they arrived, Denver International was in controlled chaos. Thousands of passengers were being efficiently moved to safe distances while tactical teams established a security perimeter. Robert and Max joined the command post, where Director Carter and Sarah were coordinating with law enforcement. Carter's previous skepticism about canine units had evaporated entirely. "Wilson, we need your dog. We've got teams searching every inch of this place, but if there are explosives, Max might be our best chance at finding them quickly." Robert nodded, already equipping Max with his tactical vest. "What areas haven't been cleared yet?" Sarah pointed to a schematic of the airport. "The central terminal is almost fully evacuated, but we haven't been able to access the underground utility tunnels in Section E. The electronic security system is malfunctioning. Doors that should be opening aren't responding." "That's where he'll be," Robert said with certainty. Wright would want to hit the central nervous system of the airport, take down power, communications, and security in one strike. Barnes assembled a tactical entry team. "If we can't get through the security doors, we'll make our own entry point. The structural blueprints show an access shaft in the maintenance garage that bypasses the electronic lock." As they moved toward this alternative entry point, Robert felt the familiar rush of adrenaline from his military days, tempered by years of experience. Max moved beside him with perfect discipline, sensing the gravity of the situation. The maintenance garage was eerily empty, the usual bustle of ground crew and vehicles replaced by the focused movement of tactical team members. The access shaft was located behind a series of storage cabinets, rarely used and barely maintained. "This leads directly to the main utility junction," Sarah explained, reviewing the blueprint on her tablet. "It's a tight fit, but it should get you past the compromised security doors." Robert checked Max's gear one last time. "He'll go first. If there are explosives down there, he'll alert before we're close enough to trigger anything." The descent through the narrow shaft was claustrophobic and tense. Max navigated the confined space with practiced ease despite his age, while the humans followed more awkwardly. The air grew noticeably cooler as they descended below the main terminal structure, the distant hum of massive HVAC systems creating an otherworldly background noise. They emerged into a wide utility tunnel illuminated by emergency lighting. The main power appeared to have been cut in this section. Agent Barnes signaled for silence as they moved forward in tactical formation, Max leading the way with Robert just behind. The German Shepherd's behavior changed subtly as they approached a junction where multiple utility tunnels converged. His pace slowed, his nose working more actively, body language signaling detection without alarm. He sensed something, but not explosives. "He's picking up a human scent," Robert whispered to Barnes. "Someone's been here recently." They continued with heightened caution until they reached a massive room filled with electrical panels, server racks, and control systems. The central infrastructure hub of the entire airport. The room should have been bustling with technicians, especially during an emergency, but it was completely deserted. Max suddenly tensed, a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. Robert instantly recognized the alert explosive material detected. Following the dog's indication, the team identified 6 sophisticated devices placed strategically around the room, each targeting a critical system node. "He's rigged the entire infrastructure," the EOD specialist whispered after a quick assessment. "Power, communications, security systems, even the backup generators. If these go off, this airport is dark and deaf for days, maybe weeks." As they began documenting the devices for safe disarmament, Max's attention shifted suddenly. His ears perked forward, body turning toward a secondary access corridor. Robert recognized the change immediately. "Someone's here," he warned. The tactical team took defensive positions as Robert gave Max the command to track. The German Shepherd led them through the corridor to another junction, where the utility tunnels branched in multiple directions. Max paused, seemingly confused by overlapping scents, before committing to the leftmost passage. The tunnel widened into another control room, smaller than the main hub but equally critical. The airport's emergency management center, designed to function independently if the main systems failed. And there, calmly working at a control panel, was Michael Wright. "FBI, hands where we can see 'em," Barnes shouted, her weapon trained on the man. Wright turned slowly, his expression eerily calm. He was older than in the photographs Robert remembered, his previously dark hair now streaked with gray, face lined with years of what looked like exhaustion more than age. "Robert Wilson," he said, recognition and something like disappointment in his voice. "Elizabeth said you might be the one to find us. She always respected your instincts." His eyes dropped to Max. "And your methods." "Step away from the panel, Michael," Robert called, noting the man's hands remained dangerously close to what could be a detonator. "Whatever you're planning, it's over. We've found the devices in the main hub." Wright smiled thinly. "Those? They're decoys. Convincing ones, but decoys nonetheless. The real system is right here." He gestured to what appeared to be a standard maintenance laptop connected to the emergency control panel. "A cascading failure protocol set to execute across 27 major airports simultaneously. Not explosions, something far more elegant." Robert kept his voice level while tactical team members slowly moved to flanking positions. "What exactly are you trying to accomplish, Michael?" "Exposure," Wright answered simply. "Elizabeth collected the evidence, but evidence can be buried again. What we needed was a demonstration the world couldn't ignore." He tapped the laptop. "This program will trigger emergency landing protocols at all 27 airports by simulating critical system failures. No planes will crash, but every flight will be grounded. In the ensuing investigation, our evidence packets will be delivered to media outlets worldwide. And you think causing global aviation panic is justified?" Robert took a careful step forward, Max moving in perfect sync with him. "When the alternative is watching more planes go down due to known defects?" "Absolutely." Wright's fingers moved slightly closer to the keyboard. William Stone wasn't the only pilot blamed for corporate negligence. There have been 17 similar incidents in the past decade, all covered up, all dismissed as pilot error while the same deadly design flaws remain unaddressed. Robert recognized the dangerous conviction in Wright's eyes, the same look he'd seen in extremists and true believers throughout his career. Reasoning wouldn't work. They needed a different approach. He gave Max an almost imperceptible hand signal, one they'd practiced countless times. The German Shepherd immediately lay down, head on pause, eyes still fixed on Wright, but body language completely non-threatening. "Michael, I believe you." Robert lowered his own weapon slightly. "I've seen the flight recorder data. The cover-up was real." Wright's expression flickered with surprise. "Then you understand why this has to happen?" "I understand why you think it does," Robert acknowledged, taking another careful step forward. "But I also know Elizabeth well enough to know she wouldn't want collateral damage. Your system might not cause planes to crash, but panic at this scale will cost lives too. Stampedes, heart attacks, accidents during emergency evacuations." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Wright's face. Elizabeth calculated acceptable risk parameters. Did she? Or did she get so focused on exposing the truth that she lost sight of what that truth was meant to protect? Robert was close enough now to see the screen of Wright's laptop, complex code flowing across it, a countdown timer in the corner showing less than 3 minutes remaining. "The aviation industry kills people through negligence every year," Wright insisted, though his conviction seemed slightly weakened. "They silence whistleblowers, falsify safety data, pressure investigators, and they should be held accountable," Robert agreed. "But not like this. Not by becoming what you're fighting against." Max, sensing the shift in the confrontation's energy, slowly rose to his feet, moving carefully closer to Wright. The EOD specialist watched the dog with a mixture of wariness and something like respect. "Elizabeth always said dogs were better judges of character than people," Wright commented, his hand hovering near the keyboard. "They can sense intention, can't they? Not just explosives or drugs, but whether someone means harm." Robert saw his opportunity. "That's why I trust Mac's judgment. He alerted on the fake Captain Thompson immediately, not because of any device, but because he sensed deception, the intent to harm." He gestured to the German shepherd, now standing calmly beside Wright's chair. "He's not alerting on you, Michael. He doesn't sense that you want to hurt people." It was a calculated psychological approach, leveraging Wright's evident respect for Elizabeth and, by extension, her respect for Robert's methods. The man looked down at Max, then back at the laptop screen where the countdown continued. "If I abort now, the evidence will still be buried," Wright said, the conflict evident in his voice. "The executives responsible will escape justice again." Agent Barnes, who had remained wisely silent during Robert's negotiation, finally spoke. "Not this time. We have the unaltered flight recorder, Wright. We have Elizabeth's documentation. The Department of Justice has already opened an investigation into Atlantic Airways based on what we found at the compound." Wright's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the countdown passing below 2 minutes. "Investigations can be derailed." "Not this one," Robert promised. "Because now we know what to look for, and because you have the opportunity to help us do this the right way." A long moment of tension stretched between them, broken only by the soft sound of Max's breathing as the dog continued to stand vigilantly beside Wright's chair. Finally, Wright's shoulders slumped slightly. His fingers moved across the keyboard, entering a complex sequence. The countdown froze, then disappeared from the screen. "Deactivation protocol accepted," a computerized voice announced from the laptop. The tactical team moved immediately, securing Wright in the computer system. As they led him away, he paused beside Robert. "Elizabeth chose the right person to find us," he said quietly. "She always said you were the one who never lost sight of why we do this work, to protect people, not principles." After Wright was taken into custody, the full scope of what they'd prevented became clear. The 27 airports targeted included major international hubs across 3 continents. Had the plan succeeded, global aviation would have ground to a halt amid unprecedented panic. Yet, as Robert watched EOD teams carefully disarm the decoy devices, he couldn't escape a troubling thought. Elizabeth Stone had been right about the core issue. People had died because of corporate negligence and regulatory failure. The system had protected itself at the expense of truth and safety. In the Emergency Management Center, now bustling with federal agents and technical specialists, Robert sat with Max, giving the tired dog a well-deserved drink of water from his cupped hand. "You know the most disturbing part?" Barnes said, dropping into a chair beside him. "Initial analysis suggests Wright was telling the truth about those 17 other incidents. We're finding evidence of systematic problems across multiple airlines and aircraft models. Problems that were identified years ago and deliberately obscured." "So Elizabeth's crusade wasn't baseless," Robert noted, scratching behind Mac's ears. "Just her methods. The irony is that she nearly became what she was fighting against, sacrificing lives for a greater goal." Barnes shook her head. "Though I have to admit, if even half of what we're uncovering is verified, this will be the biggest aviation scandal in history." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes it takes crossing a line to make people see where the line should have been drawn in the first place." As they prepared to leave the underground facility, Max suddenly stiffened, nose working actively. Before Robert could react, the German shepherd bolted down a side corridor they hadn't fully explored. "Max," Robert called, immediately following with Barnes and 2 tactical team members close behind. They found the dog pawing insistently at what appeared to be a standard storage closet. Following protocol, they carefully opened it, weapons ready. Inside wasn't a threat, but something far more surprising. Filing cabinets filled with original maintenance records, internal memos, and technical reports, all appearing to document the very cover-ups Elizabeth had claimed existed. It was a physical backup of everything she had discovered, meticulously organized and annotated. She left us a roadmap, Barnes realized, examining the first folder. Everything we need to prove the case, no matter what happens to the digital evidence. Robert felt a complicated mixture of emotions: vindication for trusting his dog's instincts, sorrow for his former colleague's fall, and grim satisfaction that the truth would finally emerge. As they emerged from the underground tunnels into the main terminal, now secured but still evacuated, Robert caught sight of Sarah conferring with Director Carter near the command post. Both looked exhausted, but relieved as they spotted Robert and Max approaching. "Dad!" Sarah hurried over, embracing him briefly before kneeling to check on Max. "Is it really over?" "The immediate threat is," Robert confirmed, "but I think the real work is just beginning." Director Carter extended his hand to Robert, unexpected respect in his eyes. "Wilson, I owe you and Max an apology. If we'd relied solely on our technological systems today," Robert accepted the handshake. "Technology has its place, sir, but some things still require instinct, experience, and a good nose." He looked down at Max, who sat alertly at his side, gray muzzle and tired eyes belying the sharp mind and unwavering courage that had potentially saved thousands of lives. The German shepherd looked up at his handler, and in that moment Robert saw not just his working partner, but the embodiment of everything technology couldn't replicate: loyalty, intuition, and the simple, profound bond between handler and dog that had ultimately uncovered a conspiracy spanning years and continents. It had all started with a seemingly routine morning patrol and one dog's refusal to let a fake pilot board a plane. Now, as federal agents secured evidence that would rock the aviation industry to its core, Robert couldn't help but wonder what other truths remained hidden, waiting for the right nose to uncover them. The aftermath of the airport operation brought no time for rest. While federal agencies secured the evidence and coordinated the international response to the thwarted plot, Robert found himself in the middle of a rapidly expanding investigation. The files recovered from Elizabeth's hidden archive painted a damning picture of corporate malfeasance spanning decades. Falsified safety reports, suppressed whistleblower testimonies, and regulatory officials compromised by industry influence. "The scope is staggering," Agent Barnes admitted during a briefing at FBI headquarters the following morning. "We're talking about potential criminal negligence affecting hundreds of commercial aircraft currently in service." Robert sat quietly through these discussions, his mind divided between the case and his growing concern for Max. The German shepherd had performed brilliantly throughout the operation, but the strain on his aging body was becoming increasingly evident. After the raid, Robert had noticed Max favoring his right hind leg more prominently than usual. The limp he'd carried for years from his old injury seemed to be worsening. "He needs rest," Robert told Sarah over a hasty lunch in the Bureau's cafeteria. "This case has pushed him beyond what I should have allowed." Sarah watched her father with understanding eyes. "Max would follow you anywhere, Dad, you know that." "That's the problem," Robert admitted, pushing his untouched sandwich aside. "He'd work himself to death if I asked him to." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the evidence analysis team. Elizabeth Stone had agreed to a limited cooperation agreement. She would provide decryption keys for her digital evidence archive in exchange for assurances that the complete truth about the aviation cover-ups would be made public. "She's not seeking immunity," Barnes explained as Robert joined her for the interview. "She's been explicit that she accepts responsibility for her actions. Her only demand is that the evidence not be suppressed or minimized." Elizabeth sat straight-backed in the interview room, her white hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes clear and focused despite her circumstances. When Robert entered, something almost like warmth flickered across her features. "You brought him down with the dog," she stated, not a question but an acknowledgement. Right was always the weak link. Too much conscience beneath the conviction. Robert took the seat across from her. Why, Elizabeth? You knew. There were other ways. Were there? She leaned forward slightly. I spent 3 years pursuing other ways, Robert. Senate committees, FAA complaints, lawsuits, media appeals. The system protected itself at every turn. Her composed facade cracked slightly, revealing the raw grief beneath. Do you know what they said about William at the end? That he was probably drinking before the flight, a decorated pilot with 22 years of perfect service, and they destroyed his reputation to protect their balance sheets. Robert understood her pain all too well, the particular agony of watching someone you love become not just a victim but a scapegoat. That doesn't justify endangering innocent people. No, Elizabeth agreed, surprising him. It doesn't. That's why the plan was never about mass casualties. The devices were designed for controlled failures, enough to ground planes and force investigations, not enough to cause catastrophic crashes. She paused, regret crossing her features. But I underestimated how trauma changes people. Some of my recruits modified the plan without my knowledge, escalated the methods beyond what I'd intended. Turner, Robert guessed, thinking of the sophisticated explosive found on Flight 1342. Elizabeth nodded. He lost his daughter in a runway incident that was classified as unfortunate but unavoidable, despite clear evidence of maintenance negligence. His grief turned to something darker than mine. She met Robert's eyes directly. I never authorized lethal devices. You have to believe that. Whether Robert believed her or not seemed less important than the immediate tasks at hand. With Elizabeth's cooperation, they began unraveling the complex web of her operation. Sleeper operatives still in position at multiple airports, digital intrusion systems planted in aviation networks, and most critically, the complete documentation of corporate safety violations that had motivated her crusade. By evening, Robert was mentally exhausted but pushed himself to attend one final briefing. Director Carter had coordinated with Homeland Security to implement emergency inspection protocols for all potentially affected aircraft, a massive undertaking that would disrupt air travel nationwide for days, possibly weeks. The public story for now is precautionary maintenance reviews, Carter explained to the assembled team. We can't risk causing panic before we've verified the full extent of the safety issues. As the meeting concluded, Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency at home. Max not doing well. Called vet. The drive to his modest suburban house felt interminable. Robert found Sarah in the living room, kneeling beside Max. The German shepherd lay on his bed, breathing heavily, unable to rise when Robert entered. He collapsed when I took him out back, Sarah explained, her voice tight with worry. His back legs just gave out. The vet is on her way. Robert knelt beside his partner, gently running his hand along Max's flank. The dog's eyes were alert and apologetic, as if sorry for causing concern. It's okay, boy, Robert murmured. You've done enough, more than enough. Dr. Andrea Collins, a veterinarian who specialized in working dogs, arrived 20 minutes later. Her examination was thorough, but her expression grew increasingly grave as she worked. There's significant deterioration in his hip joints, she finally explained. This isn't just the old injury flaring up. The MRI from his last checkup showed early signs of degenerative myelopathy, but it seems to have progressed much faster than expected. What does that mean? Sarah asked, though Robert already knew. It's a progressive disease affecting the spinal cord, Dr. Collins explained gently. Eventually, it leads to paralysis. The intense activity of the past few days probably accelerated the symptoms that were already developing. Robert felt his throat tighten. Is he in pain? Some discomfort now, yes, and it will get worse. Dr. Collins administered an injection for immediate relief. We have medications that can help manage symptoms and slow progression, but there's no cure. Given his age and the advanced presentation, we're looking at months, not years. After the vet left, Robert sat on the floor beside Max's bed, the reality sinking in that his partner, his friend, was facing a battle that couldn't be won. The German Shepherd had given everything to the job, and now his body was betraying him for that very dedication. "Dad," Sarah said softly, "you should get some rest. You've been going nonstop for days." Robert shook his head. "I'm staying with him tonight." He managed a small smile. "We still have a case to discuss. Don't we, Max?" The dog's tail thumped weakly against the bed in response. Sarah squeezed her father's shoulder and left them alone, understanding the bond that needed no human witnesses. Through the night, Robert alternated between dozing in the armchair beside Max's bed and reviewing case files. Periodically, he would read aloud interesting details to Max, maintaining their partnership ritual even now. The German Shepherd listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft whine of interest or a skeptical ear twitch that made Robert smile despite everything. By morning, the national investigation was dominating news cycles. The precautionary maintenance review story had leaked to major outlets, causing widespread flight cancellations and public concern. Robert received updates from Barnes, but remained home with Max, whose condition had stabilized somewhat with medication, but remained concerning. They found discrepancies in the inspection records for over 40 commercial aircraft so far, Robert told Max, scrolling through encrypted messages on his tablet. Elizabeth's evidence is being corroborated point by point. Max's ears perked up slightly at the name, then settled again as he dozed. Around noon, Barnes called with news that sent a chill through Robert. "We've got a problem at Denver International. Sarah was overseeing a security sweep of the administrative offices and found what appears to be an explosive device in the ceiling above the main security operations center." Robert sat up straight, instantly alert. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, followed protocol perfectly and evacuated the area. But here's the thing. This device doesn't match the others. It's more sophisticated, and it was placed months ago, according to our techs. There's another operative we haven't identified," Robert realized, a cold sensation spreading through his chest. "Someone with access to the most secure areas of the airport." "That's our assessment," Barnes confirmed. "And given the location, it has to be someone with a high-level security clearance. We're reviewing all personnel now, but I thought you should know. Sarah might be at risk if she's the one who found it." Robert looked at Max, torn between his duty to his daughter and his obligation to his ailing partner. The German Shepherd seemed to sense his conflict, struggling to rise despite his weakness. "Easy, boy," Robert soothed, gently pressing Max back down. "Not this time." But in his heart, Robert knew the case wasn't over. Someone dangerous remained at large, possibly targeting those who had thwarted Elizabeth's plan, and Sarah, his daughter, might now be in their crosshairs. The tragedy wasn't just Max's failing health or Elizabeth's fall from principled professional to extremist. It was the realization that the web of deception and danger extended further than they had imagined, and that even as one threat had been neutralized, another loomed. Perhaps even closer to home. Robert arrived at Denver International with a singular focus that overrode his exhaustion. Sarah had been moved to a secure location while FBI teams and bomb specialists worked to safely examine and disarm the sophisticated device she'd discovered. The administrative wing stood empty, evacuation barriers creating an eerie stillness in what should have been a bustling nerve center. "Dad, you shouldn't be here," Sarah said when she spotted him at the security checkpoint. "You should be with Max." "Mrs. Peterson from next door is sitting with him," Robert replied, embracing his daughter briefly. "He's resting comfortably with the medication. This couldn't wait." Agent Barnes joined them, tablet in hand, displaying security footage of the administrative offices. "We've been reviewing personnel files and access logs for the past 6 hours. The device was professionally installed, possibly during scheduled maintenance 3 months ago. Only 17 people had the necessary clearance to access that section unsupervised." "Any matches with known associates of Elizabeth Stone?" Robert asked. Barnes shook her head. "None. Everyone checks out with deep background investigations. But there's something else. We found similar devices, all dormant, at 3 other secure locations within the airport. all critical infrastructure nodes. Director Carter approached, his face drawn with stress and what looked like personal betrayal. The placement indicates intimate knowledge of our security protocols. This had to be an inside job at the highest level. Robert studied the security footage again, focusing on the maintenance records for the areas where devices were found. One name appeared consistently in the work orders. Alan Reynolds, Deputy Head of Airport Security, Carter's second in command. "Has anyone seen Reynolds today?" Robert asked suddenly. Carter frowned. He called in sick, first time in years, said he had food poisoning. Robert and Barnes exchanged knowing looks. "We need to find him, now." A tactical team was dispatched to Reynolds' suburban home while additional agents reviewed his personnel history. What emerged was disturbing. Reynolds had lost his brother in an aircraft incident 8 years earlier, one of the 17 cases Elizabeth had identified as covered-up design failures. "He never mentioned his brother's death," Carter said, visibly shaken. "Not once in 7 years working together." "Some grief runs too deep for casual conversation," Robert observed, "and some people prefer to channel it into action rather than words." The team at Reynolds' house reported back the residence was empty, with evidence of hasty departure. His vehicle was missing, along with personal items and what appeared to be several hard drives from his home office. "He's running," Barnes concluded, "which means he knows we're on to him." "Or he's implementing a contingency plan," Robert countered, the cold knot in his stomach tightening. If he was working with Elizabeth, but operating independently, the thought remained unfinished as Sarah suddenly straightened, an epiphany crossing her features. "The backup server facility," she said urgently. "It's not on the main campus. It's 5 miles east, disguised as a warehouse. Allen insisted on overseeing its security protocols personally last year. Within minutes, a tactical response was mobilized toward the nondescript warehouse that housed Denver International's backup data systems. As the team approached, satellite imagery confirmed a single vehicle matching Reynolds' car parked behind the facility. Robert, against protocol but leveraging his unique experience with the case, was permitted to join the outer perimeter team. Barnes coordinated the tactical entry while Sarah remained at the command center, guiding them through the facility's layout. "Approaching east entrance," the tactical lead reported through comms. "No visible movement inside, but thermal imaging shows one heat signature in the main server room." What happened next unfolded with the chaotic precision of a well-executed operation meeting desperate resistance. Reynolds, cornered in the server room, engaged in a brief exchange of gunfire before being wounded and apprehended. No agents were seriously injured, though the server room itself sustained significant damage. Robert entered the facility after it was secured, finding Reynolds being treated by medics before transport. The man looked smaller somehow, his security uniform replaced by civilian clothes. His authoritative demeanor dissolved into grim resignation. "Allen," Robert acknowledged, standing at a safe distance. "Why risk everything now?" Elizabeth's operation was already exposed. Reynolds looked up, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Wilson, the dog handler." He gave a short, pained laugh. "Should have known it would be something so simple that unraveled everything." "Your brother was on Atlantic Airways Flight 227, Robert said. "Not a question, but a confirmation. The crash they blamed on turbulence and pilot decision-making. They knew the stabilizer actuators were faulty." Reynolds replied, voice hardening despite his injuries. 5 incidents before my brother's flight, all dismissed as within operational parameters." Elizabeth found the internal memos. Engineers warning about catastrophic failure risks, executives calculating that settlements would be cheaper than recall. Barnes entered, having overseen the evidence collection. "We found what he was after," she told Robert. "He wasn't here to destroy data, he was downloading it. Years of internal communications between airlines, manufacturers, and regulatory officials. Makes Elizabeth's evidence look like a preview." Reynolds' eyes closed briefly. Elizabeth's approach was too theatrical, too easy to dismiss as terrorism. The truth needed to come from inside the system itself. He fixed Robert with an intense stare. Do you know how many people die each year because of known, preventable aviation defects? People who trust their lives to an industry that calculates their value against quarterly profits. Robert felt the uncomfortable weight of partial sympathy. Reynolds and Elizabeth had identified real corruption. Their methods, not their core grievances, were what crossed into criminality. The evidence is secure now, Barnes assured them both. If what's there confirms your allegations, there will be prosecutions, but you chose the wrong way to expose it, just like Elizabeth did. As Reynolds was led away to a waiting ambulance, Robert remained in the damaged server room, surveying the physical manifestation of a decade-long conspiracy. Towers of hard drives containing perhaps millions of communications that would eventually expose negligence at the highest levels of the aviation industry. His phone vibrated with a text from Sarah. Evidence team finding major revelations already, multiple executives implicated. This goes higher than anyone expected. Robert drove back to the main airport complex in contemplative silence. The case had transformed from what seemed initially like a straightforward terrorism threat into something far more morally complex. Whistleblowers who became extremists, corporate executives who prioritized profit over human life, regulators who looked the other way. Where did justice lie in such a tangled web? At the command center, the atmosphere had shifted from urgent crisis response to stunned revelation. Intelligence analysts moved between workstations with the focused intensity of people uncovering a truth too significant to fully process. We've only scratched the surface of Reynolds' archive, Barnes told Robert when he arrived. But what we've found already, she shook her head. Internal memos explicitly acknowledging design flaws in at least 3 major aircraft models currently in service. Coordinated efforts to discredit whistleblowers, falsified test data submitted to certification authorities, and William Stone's crash? Robert asked, thinking of Elizabeth. Preliminary assessment confirms her claims. The official report was demonstrably falsified. He was fighting a mechanical failure that shouldn't have been possible, according to the aircraft certified design parameters. Sarah joined them, tablet in hand displaying what appeared to be internal corporate emails. Dad, this is bigger than Atlantic Airways. We're seeing evidence of industry-wide practices, shared methods for concealing defects, coordinating responses to incidents, even blacklisting engineers who raise safety concerns. Director Carter, looking like he had aged a decade in a day, approached with a senior FBI official. Wilson, we owe you and your dog an incalculable debt. Without Max alerting to that first fake pilot, he couldn't finish the thought. The senior FBI official nodded agreement. We're implementing emergency protocols for a managed release of this information. Aircraft with identified critical flaws are being grounded immediately, but we need to prevent public panic while maintaining transparency. As the magnitude of the revelation continued to unfold around him, Robert stepped away briefly to call his neighbor about Max. The report was positive. The German Shepherd had eaten a little and seemed comfortable, though still weak. When he returned to the command center, he found the real Captain James Thompson, the pilot whose identity had been stolen at the beginning of this case, being debriefed after his medical evaluation. Thompson had been kept sedated in Elizabeth's compound for days, but was recovering well physically. Officer Wilson, Thompson acknowledged when Robert approached. They told me it was your dog that first raised the alarm. If he hadn't... He trailed off, the implications too heavy to voice. Max was just doing his job, Robert replied modestly. Thompson shook his head. Not just a job. When I was being held, Elizabeth Stone would come talk to me sometimes. She wasn't cruel. She made sure I was cared for. She told me about her husband, about what happened to him. He paused, collecting himself. The thing is, I've experienced unexplained system behaviors in that same aircraft model. Things that didn't match the manual, but that we were told to handle with established procedures and not document officially. The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. The very pilot who had been victimized by Elizabeth's operation was confirming her core allegations. Will you testify to that? he asked quietly. Thompson nodded without hesitation. After what I've learned, absolutely. This industry needs cleaning up from the inside, not attacks from the outside. As evening fell over Denver International, operations remained suspended while emergency inspections commenced nationwide. The story had begun breaking across major news outlets, carefully managed by federal authorities, but still sending shockwaves through the aviation industry and financial markets. Robert finally headed home, physically and emotionally depleted, but carrying a complex sense of resolution. Elizabeth Stone and her operatives would face justice for their methods, but their core allegations, the corruption they had sought to expose, would finally see the light of day. And it had all begun with a German shepherd refusing to let a pilot board his plane. 1 month later, Denver International Airport had resumed its normal operations, though normal now carried a different meaning. The aviation industry was undergoing the most significant safety overhaul in its history, with congressional hearings, international investigations, and widespread reforms happening simultaneously. 3 major airlines had grounded entire fleets of aircraft, pending critical safety modifications, and dozens of executives faced criminal indictments for fraud, negligence, and obstruction of justice. The morning dawned clear and cool as Robert Wilson adjusted his dress uniform in the mirror, fingers carefully aligning the commendation medal recently awarded by the Department of Homeland Security. At 68, his weathered features had gained additional lines in the past month, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You look distinguished, Dad," Sarah said, appearing in the doorway of his bedroom. She wore a formal Navy suit, her own commendation pin visible on her lapel for her role in uncovering the hidden devices. "Distinguished is just a polite way of saying old," Robert replied with a small smile, turning from the mirror. "How's our patient this morning?" Together they moved to the living room, where Max lay on a plush orthopedic bed near the sunny window. The German shepherd's condition had stabilized with aggressive treatment, though Dr. Collins had been clear that they were managing his degenerative disease, not curing it. Today, however, Max seemed stronger, his eyes bright and alert, almost as if he understood the significance of the occasion. "He had a good breakfast," Sarah reported, kneeling to gently stroke the dog's head. "And he's been watching the door, like he knows we're going somewhere special." "He always knows," Robert said softly, joining his daughter beside Max's bed. "Ready for your big day, partner?" Max's tail thumped against the cushion in response. With careful movements that respected the dog's dignity despite his weakened state, Robert attached a specially designed support harness that would help Max walk short distances. The German shepherd rose steadily with the harness's assistance, determination evident in every movement. The ceremony at Denver International Airport had been organized as both a public recognition of those who had thwarted the terrorist plot and the official launch of new aviation safety protocols named, appropriately, the Vigilance Initiative, verified inspection guidelines, and integrated liaison assessment for national commercial equipment safety. The event was being held in the main terminal, now adorned with banners and a small stage. Media crews had set up their equipment, and a respectable crowd of airport employees, security personnel, and invited guests filled the seating area. Director Carter greeted Robert, Sarah, and Max as they arrived, his demeanor warmer than it had been in all their previous years of working together. "Wilson," he said, shaking Robert's hand firmly, "and the hero of the hour." He bent slightly to acknowledge Max, who regarded the director with dignified acceptance of the attention. Agent Barnes joined them, elegantly professional in her FBI attire. "The Secretary of Transportation just arrived. We're ready to begin whenever you are." She knelt briefly to Max's level. "How are you doing, boy? Hanging in there?" Robert appreciated that everyone addressed Max directly, treating him not as a piece of equipment, but as the intelligent partner he had always been. The ceremony began with formal addresses from various officials, each highlighting different aspects of the thwarted plot and the subsequent safety investigation. Director Carter spoke eloquently about the balance between technological advancement and human-animal partnership in security operations. Agent Barnes detailed the ongoing prosecutions of captured operatives and corporate executives alike. When it was Robert's turn to speak, he approached the podium slowly, Max walking carefully beside him with a support harness. The audience fell silent, many visibly moved by the German Shepherd's determined gait, despite his obvious physical challenges. 35 years ago, when I first began working with K9 units, a wise trainer told me something I've never forgotten, Robert began, his voice steady and clear. He said that while we humans have created remarkable technology, we've never invented anything that can match what nature perfected over thousands of years. The bond between humans and dogs and the extraordinary sensory capabilities our canine partners bring to our work. He glanced down at Max, who sat attentively beside him. 1 month ago, this airport and hundreds of lives were saved because this dog, in his 10th year of service, recognized something wasn't right about a man in a pilot's uniform. No scanner detected the threat, no algorithm flagged an anomaly. Max did, and he insisted we listen. Robert continued, recounting the investigation's key moments while emphasizing the broader lessons learned. Not just about security procedures, but about corporate accountability and the true meaning of public safety. The individuals who orchestrated this plot were wrong in their methods, but not in their core concern, he said, addressing the uncomfortable truth at the heart of the case. They had identified a devastating failure in our systems, not just in aircraft design, but in the regulatory framework meant to protect us. Their grievances were legitimate, even if their response was not. As the ceremony concluded, the Secretary of Transportation unveiled a plaque commemorating the events and officially announcing the establishment of an expanded K9 training facility at Denver International, one that would integrate advanced technology with traditional handling techniques rather than replacing one with the other. And, the Secretary added with a warm smile toward Robert and Max, the facility will be named the Wilson Max K9 Training Center, ensuring that the partnership that saved countless lives will continue to inspire and train future handlers and their canine partners. The audience rose in standing ovation as Robert knelt beside Max, overcome with emotion at this unexpected recognition. The German Shepherd pressed his head against Robert's hand, a gesture of affection and partnership that needed no translation. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the media conducted final interviews, Captain James Thompson approached Robert and Max. The pilot had become one of the most prominent whistleblowers in the ongoing aviation safety hearings, his testimony helping to validate the documentary evidence recovered from Elizabeth Stone's archives. "Officer Wilson," Thompson greeted him, then knelt to Max's level. "And Officer Max, I wanted to thank you both personally, again, not just for saving my life, but for what's happening now." He gestured around them. "Real change, actual accountability. It wouldn't have happened without you." Robert nodded in acknowledgement. "How are you holding up with all the testimony?" "It's exhausting," Thompson admitted, "but necessary. Every time I start to feel discouraged, I think about Elizabeth Stone's husband, about how his death was dismissed as pilot error when he was actually fighting to save his passengers until his last breath." He paused. "She was wrong to do what she did, but I understand her desperation now." As they parted ways, Sarah rejoined her father and Max. "The reception is starting in the conference center. Think Max is up for a little more celebration before we take him home?" Robert assessed his partner carefully. "What do you think, Max? One more public appearance?" The German Shepherd's tail wagged once, decisively. The reception was mercifully brief, with light refreshments and informal conversations among the key figures from the investigation. Robert noticed Dr. Collins, Max's veterinarian, speaking with Director Carter in the corner. She caught his eye and approached. "I wanted to see my favorite patient on his big day," she explained, gently examining Max while maintaining his dignity. "He's doing remarkably well considering the activity level." "And long-term?" Robert asked quietly, the question that had been weighing on him for weeks. Dr. Collins's expression softened. "The medications are working better than I expected. He's comfortable and his quality of life is good. With this level of care, we could be looking at months, maybe even a year." She placed a hand on Robert's arm. "And he's happy, Robert. That's what matters most." As the reception wound down, Robert noticed Sarah deep in conversation with Barnes. When she returned to his side, there was a hesitant excitement in her expression. "Dad, Agent Barnes just told me something interesting. The FBI's Canine Training Division has a litter of German Shepherd puppies, future working dogs. They're looking for experienced handlers to foster and pre-train them before formal FBI training." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Sarah, I'm retiring in 4 months." "Exactly," she replied. "Perfect timing to start a new chapter as a training consultant. And," she glanced down at Max, "Dr. Collins thinks it might be good for Max to have a purpose in his retirement. A puppy to help mentor." The idea struck Robert with unexpected force. Not a replacement for Max, never that, but a continuation of their work together in a different form, a legacy of sorts. That evening, as the sun set over Denver, Robert sat on his back porch with Max resting comfortably beside his chair. The German Shepherd dozed peacefully, occasionally opening his eyes to check on his handler before returning to his rest. Robert thought about the journey they had shared, from routine airport patrols to uncovering one of the most significant conspiracies in aviation history. He thought about Elizabeth Stone, now awaiting trial, but whose evidence was transforming an industry. He thought about the lives saved, not just from the immediate plot, but potentially thousands more who would fly on safer aircraft because of what had been exposed. And he thought about beginnings disguised as endings. Max's working career concluding, but perhaps evolving into something new. His own retirement approaching, not as an end, but as a transition. "What do you think about having a pupil, Max?" he asked softly. "Some young dog we could teach all your tricks to." Max's tail thumped against the deck boards, once, twice, a clear vote of approval. In the distance, Robert could see planes taking off from Denver International, their lights tracing paths into the darkening sky. They rose more safely tonight because of what had begun with one dog's insistence that something wasn't right. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, Max had reminded everyone of the irreplaceable value of instinct, loyalty, and the ancient bond between humans and their most faithful companions. Some truths, Robert reflected, could only be discovered by those who remembered how to trust what technology couldn't measure. The wisdom that sometimes came not from algorithms or security protocols, but from the heart of a dog who knew his duty and the handler who trusted him without question. In the twilight of our working years, it's easy to feel obsolete in a world racing toward technology and automation. Robert Wilson's story reminds us that what truly saves lives isn't always the newest innovation, but the wisdom that only comes with experience and the bonds we've built over decades. Max, a German Shepherd approaching retirement, wasn't valuable despite his age, but because of it. His years of experience, his unwavering loyalty, his intuition that no machine could replicate. When everyone else saw an outdated method, Max saw what mattered. Like Max, we carry wisdom that algorithms can't compute. Our value doesn't diminish with gray hair or slower steps. Sometimes the most important contribution we make comes when others have written us off. Remember this. In a society obsessed with the new, there remains irreplaceable worth in weathered hands, experienced eyes, and faithful hearts. Our lifetime of judgment and intuition isn't obsolete, it's essential. Just as Max saved hundreds of lives when technology couldn't, your experience and wisdom remain vital to those around you, perhaps when they need it most. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.